All right, part two, act two. So kind of a rambly video last time. Gonna be more of a rambly video this time, but I actually have things to show you. So it will be at least a little more interesting visually. So, what am I going to talk about in this video? I'm going to talk about sound and I'm going to talk about Reiki. And these may be odd things for you to hear me talk about, but they're part of where things are going. So, at the end of the last video, I kind of said, I learned through the work that I was doing spiritually, that a witch who can't curse can't cure. Right? It was sort of coming to grips with the fact that there's a certain amount of our practice that is kind of bringing the pain where we need it to be brought, you know what I mean, to people who deserve it, and other things. It's not, to me, it's not a question of good or bad. It's a question of justice. It's a question of defending people who need to be defended, including queer people, right? Including people like me and those who are even more impacted. But the other, so that's a famous kind of phrase, right? A witch who can't curse can't cure. The other side of that phrase is a witch who can't cure can't curse. And so, in the last video I talked about how last year was a really rough year in a lot of ways, and a low, very very low year. I mean, I don't think I showed it publicly much, but it was, and really even privately, there was a lot that happened last year that I just didn't talk about to anybody. Yet, at that point, it's been discussed now. I don't keep things bottled up, but I was like, this is just for me right now. And a lot of even what I've talked about in the last videos, sort of things I don't necessarily love. Like I said, I don't like talking about it in that way, but I really, really, I don't even know that I would call it a depression. I think it was something else, because I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel the depressive things that I'm familiar with. I felt unsafe. In a lot of places, especially in public. And one of the things that I noticed was that I would go to the grocery store and just feel sick. Or anywhere I went, to pick up, to run errands, to go to the post office, to pick up my prescriptions, whatever. Grocery store most commonly. I would get furious within seconds. And I just think I, in many ways, had just been left so open in a lot of ways, and raw, you know what I mean, and just exposed, just in a lot of ways. And I really wasn't seeing anybody. I wasn't seeing my friends, right? Like, I wasn't really going out. The holidays were kind of dreadful in the sense of, like, I just couldn't wait for them to be over. Winter, the winter really didn't do it, and it wasn't the winter, it was just sort of a lot of things. But I was sleeping a lot, napping a lot, and also in that time sort of being very internal and doing a lot of spiritual work with my guides, which is the thing, again, I don't like really saying, but that's been part of the thing too. And during that work, I said, I can't go on. I just can't keep doing this. I can't go on. Like, I'm so unhappy. I am so frustrated. I'm so angry all the time. I feel so unsafe. I feel so raw. And I don't want to do anything. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to be around anybody. And I just knew, this was not, the solution wasn't therapy anymore, that I'd done that. I'm on medication for certain parts of that part of me, and none of it was really helping. And I frankly just didn't really even want to engage more with the medical community after what a hard time I had with the ADD pieces of things. And so, I started just following impulses, I guess, because I don't want to say, like, I got the idea that I should do this. There was a sound bath that was happening nearby. I went to that, loved it, and decided I need singing bowls, right? I need these crystal singing bowls. And I did a video, I showed you those. And then that kind of evolved, and I wound up with more, and I'm going to bring one out just again because I promised something to show you. So I started exploring different kinds. So the singing bowls that I showed before, those were the C major scale. This is part of a set that is, it's the solfeggio tones, and this is 528, I think. And this is called the love frequency. I mean, they all have different kind of idea names that go with them and stuff, but the idea being that this is a frequency that invites love and healing and DNA repair. And it's a shy bowl, I call it. It's thick. It's like a thick boy, and it's made out of lazulite, I think, in court. No, this is. Is it lazulite? No, that's the blue one. I can look it up. It's got a beautiful tone to it. It needs to be woken up before it'll sing this way, and it's also hard for me to do this while I'm holding it, particularly in my non-dominant hand. So it's a beautiful sound. It's a beautiful experience. I love these. I have 4 solfeggio bowls. There are 3 more. And the quality that these products are, these are great bowls. I love them. These are from Six Links, but my customer experience buying this set was a nightmare. They just never responded to my questions, my what the hell is going on, because never got a shipping notice, and they just finally one day showed up, and it was a really bad experience. And the only way I managed to get an email was by responding to one of their ad emails, and eventually through a Facebook comment that I left like 2 months later, they were like, "Oh, did anyone get back to you?" No, and I called. So love the product. They're very affordable. They claim at any rate to also be, ethically sourced. Whatever the fuck that means, but it was just a really bad experience ordering. So I don't know if I'm gonna get the other 3. And the only one who does those now. There's not a lot of singing bowls in the solfeggio tones because they have to mess with the frequency and whatevers to like sing. Certain pitches are just too high for singing bowls. Anyway, then I started taking some classes on sound healing through Life Changing Energy, which is a company that I just saw. I kept getting ads for on Instagram, and actually the courses are pretty good. They're sort of self-paced, and so I took the one on their sound bowls, and then I took the tuning forks course. And so here's a tuning fork that is in the same frequency as the bowl I just had. They're both green because it's associated with the heart chakra. Although the solfeggio tones, like there's really no association between the sounds and the chakras up until recently. I should say too, I'm saying chakras. It's really a harder C than that. Chakra is how it's really pronounced. Now, this is a weighted tuning fork. And there's this is a set of 9, I think, or 10. And so there are like the core solfeggio tones, and then there's a couple extra. But so if you strike a weighted tuning fork with a mallet like this, it will make a little bit of a sound. It just doesn't make much of one. And I don't know if you can hear that. But what you're really after is the vibration. So you probably won't be able to hear that. But anyway, these are weighted tuning forks. They're actually not about the sound per se. It's about the vibration, like I said, and they're meant to be used on you. And so, what you do, you can this is fine if you really do want to hear the tone, but it doesn't. They don't last, right? They don't sustain the way a singing bowl does, or the way an unweighted tuning fork would. So what you're really doing with this is sort of activating it and then like putting it on your body, right? So I tend to use these with like each week, like I said, there's 9. I lay them all out, put my hand kind of out, and I just choose one to work with for the week. And it's quite cool. This is, these have not been quite as like powerful experiences for me as the singing bowls, but it's also like a more subtle experience. And I've been using these in distance Reiki treatments too, which has been very interesting. And it's a really nice experience, like especially on bony parts of ourselves, like the crown chakra, the back of the head, like the sort of pituitary, I think they call this the pituitary chakra, or the and really you just kind of, this is how I tend to activate it most. A hockey puck also works, and And so this has taken me into the work of Eileen McCusick that I'm not really going to talk about in this video because I want to talk about it more later. But I'm really fascinated by her work, and I do have her sonic slider tuning fork, which I love. It's my favorite one. Just got it a few days ago, but it's already my favorite. These are great, and I do find them really useful. Just for elevating my mood, or if I'm feeling a little low. They're really good for headaches. Sort of put them on your like third eye. And you can buy little like boots and handle attachments and stuff to like have crystals or whatever. So, anyway, those two things are really interesting. The singing bowls have a much more powerful impact. I can feel it happening. These solfeggio forks, and they're really, I mean, these from Life Changing Energy come in this great, like, each one is a different color. They're really beautiful colors. Like, they did a nice job with these. I think these are machined, which is good. If you're looking for tuning forks, you're looking for machined aluminum, not cast, to sustain. And these, obviously, like, aluminum ones that are machined are going to be a little more expensive, but... so, yeah, anyway. So, those are the tuning forks. So, anyway, that was all happening, and then, simultaneous to all of that, I decided to go to a Reiki session, and I had a really interesting... Oh, it was because the person who did the sound bath told me I do Reiki, and I said I've never had a Reiki. I want to know more about that. So I went and had a session. It was pretty interesting. I'd heard that people have these like whoa moments doing it, and I really didn't have a moment like that. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, and within a week I had signed up for level 1 and 2 training, and then in the space between that, like deciding to go and the class, I got sick, and I was like, oh, this is a sign. I shouldn't be doing this. This is dumb. This doesn't work. But I went to the class anyway, because I felt better the next day. And I just like, be curious, and I was curious. And I had a really good time. I really loved the class. I enjoyed the class. It was a Saturday, Sunday, and I had a moment during the Saturday where I was like, this is such fake shit. This is probably a Ponzi scheme, but this was a really fun class. And then, I don't know, I left, and I just started practicing on myself every morning, and started, I don't know, I was like, is this working? Is this doing anything? I don't know, like, I didn't really feel different, but I could feel in my hands, when I put my hands on myself, I could feel something. My hands got really hot. Like, I've always had hot hands, but this was different. It was, like, directed somehow. And then I did, like, my sister was having a bad day, and I was like, I can do distance Reiki, which I didn't even know was a thing, but it's been a thing since the beginning of it. And she was like, yeah, why not? And she's like, oh my god, like, she had a conference call. She's like, it was great. It went well. It went amazing. She thought it was going to be a nightmare. And I felt so calm, she said, during it. So I've been doing, like, distance Reiki. And then I noticed at a certain point that all that I described earlier about being raw and open and, like, going out into the world and just feeling unsafe, like, that changed dramatically. What had changed most, though, was that my mood was really stable. Not, like, medication stable. Not, like, dead stable, right? Just, like, I wouldn't say I was happy. I wasn't like, oh my god, life's great, everything's wonderful, I'm fixed. But I also wasn't the other side of that either, which is where I usually was. And even now, a few months later, I feel even keeled most of the time, unless I go a few days without Reiki, which I try to do every day. I don't do it every day, but I try to do it every day, at least a little bit. And, sometimes I go through the real formal activated process, and sometimes when I'm reading, I just put my hand here on my stomach because I have digestive issues, or, on my forehead. This will help me focus, I find. So, and then I just became kind of annoyingly evangelical about it. Like, I wanted everyone to know about it. And I was like, don't become that person, like, chill, but, when people want to talk about it. But in my inimitable way, I also began reading like crazy about it. And so I'm now absolutely 100% going to do level 3 when I'm eligible, because I really want to teach it. I really want other people to experience this sort of evening out, which I gotta tell you, is necessary if you want to stay engaged in modern life, right? And so that's the thing that I'm realizing now, is that healing actually really is important. It's just not the healing that I understood from social media. It's like activated healing, right? Fixing the shit that's broken, and maybe even in ways that are less navel gazing than therapy. I don't mean to say therapy is always navel gazing, but there's a meme right now that it strikes me, which is like, right now somewhere the worst person you know is being told by their therapist that they need to practice self-care. You know what I mean? Like that kind of, it's like, yeah. Like Reiki doesn't, you can't direct Reiki, you can't tell it where to go. It's not you, it's not part of you. You are just a conduit. You are literally just a wire. You know, and not, I mean, maybe that sounds a little like negative. I don't mean it that way. It's just, that's where a channel, you know. The energy comes through you, and it either through your hands, your eyes, your mouth. You know, you can blow, you can send Reiki with your breath. Maybe not in a post-COVID world ideal, but it's part of the tradition. You can send it with your eyes, and you can do distance Reiki. And one of the reasons why, and I loved the hearing this way. There's a podcast called the Reiki Radio Podcast, and the host, Yolanda, said, you know, the Reiki distance treatment dissolves the illusion of separateness, because we're not separate. And actually, Eileen McCusick, who I referenced earlier, her work, her scientific work, has actually demonstrated that distance healing works. So I just kind of wanted to do like a little show and tell on books that I've read, because I read a lot, like in a short amount of time. So I just thought it'd be fun to kind of share what's out there. And like, if you're curious, if you're Reiki curious, I will tell, it really absolutely has changed my life. It really has. And I don't say things like that ever. I'm not, you know, there's no one sponsoring me to say this. You know, I don't teach yet. So this isn't even me trying to drum up students down the line. It's, I am a different person than I was when I took that class in April. And I am a much easier person to be, if that makes sense. It doesn't make life easier, but it's easier to be me in this life right now. Not every day, not always, you know, I have my moments, but a lot of the time, and it helps other people too. And that's kind of, you know, if you know my journey, if you know my history, like, I have a very strongly anti-esoteric slant in my tarot reading, and that isn't going to change. But my clients started needing something else, you know, and I started, I think, needing something else too. And so I was like, how do I do that? How do I bring that to my clients in a way that's ethical and kind of not annoyingly regulated in ways that I can't afford? And so, like, tuning forks, Act 2 of 2. No, this is part 2 of Act 2. Anyway. Yeah, tuning forks, Reiki, those all became things that I felt like these were things I could offer. I haven't started doing that yet in sessions, but I want to. And I'm exploring how, you know, I might work with Reiki and tarot. And so I took this deck and I just gave it Reiki. And I give it Reiki when I use it. I don't use it that much because I haven't had much time to explore this. But this is the Zillich Tarot, and it just sort of felt like I said, what's a deck that I like that I don't really use and that I've never really used? And so I Reiki'd this deck, and I said, what can I use this to explore? Like, you can't tell Reiki what to work on, right? Reiki is smarter than we are. But it will consider intention. And so for me, it's sort of like what I've tried so far is like laying out a chakra reading. I did it again, a chakra reading. And so you'll see all the time, I try to pronounce things correctly, but I fail a lot. So I'll do a chakra reading and then sort of feel over the chakras, which set of cards wants my attention most. And then the cards will kind of tell me why. So that's one thing I've tried. I'm going to try more. But I'd really actually like to sort of offer tarot readings in combination with Reiki sessions. And sort of it's about figuring out how to make that work. But I took this deck and play with it that way. And so that may be something you'll see from me in the future. And I think it's nice. Distance Reiki really works. It really does. I mean, everyone that I've worked on it, has said, whoa. And even, so typically what I do is this is not uncommon. You use a stuffed animal, and I'll do, one of the things that you do in Reiki is called Biosin scanning. And so you sort of use Reiki to sort of say, is there an area that's kind of feeling wonky or activated? And like, actually here, this isn't a real session, but I can kind of feel something here, and it could be just that my hand is right underneath that, it's probably what it is. But, in real life, and what I found is you sort of come up and down, you can sort of feel where it starts, and so I'll work on it from a distance, and it gets lower and lower and lower, and this would be sort of the root sacral chakra area, right? And you can touch the surrogate, you wouldn't really touch a client there, obviously. I hope not, anyway. But you can feel it, and so then sometimes I'll like take the tuning fork and then kind of work the area there too, and send Reiki through the tuning fork, to just kind of, if you think about like something was here that we moved back in, or that resolved, and it's kind of fill in with like a lovely loving vibration here. It's not always that frequency, but anyway. So, but I thought I would share some just like interesting Reiki literature and what I thought about the books. The first thing I want to share, though, is actually not a book. It's a deck, and it is the Reiki Oracle Reiki Divine Healing Card Deck by Brett Bevel. Brett Bevel is a really interesting guy. Art by Ben Shikowitz. Brett is one of the sort of, I think, programmers that work at programming at Omega. So they bring in all the guests and the presentations at Omega. But he's written a lot of books, really fascinating books. And the two that I've read so far are Psychic Reiki, and I'm going to talk about this one a little bit more. But then I want to talk about this one first, the Reiki Magic Guide to Self-Attunement. So if you know anything about Reiki, this may be like, what the fuck is this? You can't attune yourself. Technically, no. And that's kind of not what this book does. You can't attune yourself to Reiki. So if you don't know, to become a Reiki practitioner for yourself or others, you need to be activated, right? So most of the training is about history and like hand positions, but the thing that really happens during the training is that your teacher attunes you, and different branches have different ways of doing this. But you need to have a teacher to attune you to each level in the United States. There's so much to talk about this, like, oh my god. So anyway, so this is not a book about how to attune yourself. You can't. What it does do, though, is it says, this book is an attunement for people who are curious about Reiki or who can't afford it. And so the whole point of Reiki, from Reiki's own history, is to heal so that everyone can reach enlightenment, right? And the idea being that healing is central to humanity's ability to collectively fix what's broken. And in Japan, it's actually very rare to have something like that be brought outside of families. But the founder of Reiki, of what we know as Reiki today, is Makao Usui, was get it out there, and it did. And so Brett's attitude about this book is like, we need healing. People need healing. People need Reiki. And so if you can't afford to go to the class, if you can't afford to have a teacher, but you need it, here's an attunement. And this will attune you to level 1 and 2. And it's like a whole little primer in it. And I'm sure there are other folks who do this too. There are arguments that say you cannot be distance attuned to Reiki. There are arguments that say you have to have a teacher, that there has to be an exchange of energy. Brett kind of addresses all of those in here. So if you're Reiki curious, this might be a good step to sort of just experience what it's like. I was already attuned when I read this, but I can tell you, when I read his books, and I'm going to talk about this in the deck in a second, you can feel shit happening. It's unlike any other experience I've had before. So if you want to give yourself Reiki and you're not ready to take a class, or you can't afford it or whatever, this is a good way to do it, right? And Brett has classes on his website and stuff too. You can, I think, take classes on Reiki with him. To me, I don't see why a distance attunement wouldn't work. Because if the whole point of distance healing is that it dissolves the illusion of separateness, you don't need to be standing next to someone to have an attunement. And in fact, my attunement was not physical. It was a meditation. I was in the room with my teacher, but typically there's a physical attunement that happens. Mine was not. And it seems to have worked perfectly fine. So this book, Psychic Reiki, may be more interesting to you if you have Reiki already. This is kind of a series of Reiki, I would call it a series of Reiki experiments, centered around the idea of what Brett calls a Reiki crystal that he received during kind of a meditation or during a Reiki practice from Usui himself. And if you listen to interviews with Brett, it makes more sense, or if you read this book. But essentially, this book has Reiki in it. And there are little meditations, sounds so dismissive, but they work. You're going to feel it. It's going to be like, touch this thing on the page, or read this thing on the page, and you're going to feel it. It's crazy. Really fascinating stuff. And so that's all by way of getting to this Oracle deck, which is the Reiki Divine Healing Oracle deck. And when I first saw it, I didn't like it. Mostly because there are cards in it that don't match alignment, right? They're horizontal and landscape, which drives me nuts. And there are spreads in the book, and so that makes me nuts. But actually, I don't think I would ever use more than one card from this deck now that I've used it a few times, because I'm not going to show you the deck, because the Reiki symbols do appear in here, and some people think that that's not ethical, or it's wrong. They're not secret. They're all over the internet, but I won't do it out of respect. Again, they don't do anything if you're not attuned to them, so it doesn't really matter. But what this deck sort of builds on is Brett's idea that you can embed Reiki in anything and then call on it to deliver a Reiki session to you, you know what I mean? And so these cards, as you go through, I'm just going to pick one that isn't a symbol. What do we got? The Reiki Sphere of Divine Grace. So some of these are concepts that are Reiki, some of them are like later additions to it, Brett's own things. So I wouldn't say this is like traditional Reiki, but I'm just gonna go to this book. This is the Reiki Sphere. There's different suits in the deck. 9. And they're all numbered, which makes it easy to find, but they're not necessarily the most intuitive way to look for them. 28. So this is called the Reiki Sphere of Divine Grace. So I'll just read this. Traditional Reiki is simply a flow or wave of energy, but the Reiki crystal can manifest shapes of Reiki that will hold an integral Reiki vibration over a period of time. The Reiki Sphere of Divine Grace is just one such shape. Literally a bubble of Reiki that envelops you on all levels of your being and gives you the sense of being truly held and supported by the divine. This card can be used to surround you in the healing magic of its beautiful sphere of Reiki. To experience this, hold the card and say, and then he gives you a little mantra. And you just look at the card and experience the card. Sorry, my blinds are going crazy. And, you could, I'll put this right here. Okay, and you can pause it, right? What you would want to say, I would like the Reiki crystal in this card to create a Reiki sphere of divine grace around me. So you can say that out loud or in your mind. I'll say it again. I would like the Reiki crystal in this card to create a Reiki sphere of divine grace around me. Pause the video or see if there's an image of this online, and then just let it do its thing. It happens. Now, it happens when you're in a space for it to happen, right? If you're in the middle of chaos, it won't. If you do what I typically do with oracles, which is like grab a card quick and be like, okay, yep, it's not going to work. But I've taken my time with these, and it's quite cool. So, yeah, I wouldn't really use more than one card because each card is kind of a Reiki treatment. And I don't know that you need to be attuned to Reiki to experience that because, again, it uses this idea of a Reiki crystal. And when you read this book, it will attune you to that crystal. And then if you do this, you'll just have like a basic Reiki 1 and 2 certification. The idea behind, not certification, that's what I wanted to say. The idea behind this is this will allow you to do Reiki on yourself and your friends, but not to do it on people who you don't know, because you really do need professional training, is the argument. And, if you are going to work with people you don't know, you want to understand the business side of things. So here are some books. I'm just going to tell you some books about Reiki that I've read and whether or not I recommend them, and I'm actually going to turn off the blur if I can do that. I don't know if I can do that now. Can I? Video effects.
I didn't get that.
Shut
Could
up,
you try
Siri.
again?
Alright, does that work? That works a little better. Okay. No, I don't need that, Siri. Go away. Alright. So this is the first book. This is Reiki the Healing Touch. It's actually the manual that I used in class, and it's quite good. I liked it a lot. So this, you might look familiar. I think it was one of the first Reiki manuals ever. Obviously been updated over the years. And that's the tradition that I was Reiki'd into, I guess. So it's Holy Fire Reiki, it's called. Holy Fire 3. It's sort of an interesting thing, but like Reiki branches off into, as it does, into different things. I'm not going to get into like all of that, but the basics is that created, sort of discovered really by Asue in Japan, sort of between the wars, and during a fasting and enlightenment experience. Goes out into the world, starts teaching people. He passes away. There's a society in Japan that still exists, at least as of the most recent books I've read, although it's dwindling because it's an invitation-only kind of thing. One of his students taught a Japanese-American woman who lived in Hawaii. Lots of complicated stuff with Hawaii, right? Won't get into all the politics there, but she learned it, became a Reiki teacher. The word master did not really come into play until I think about her work. She was the only Reiki master for a long time. To get Reiki master training for many, many years was $10,000 at her requirement. The argument being that in order to respect it, you needed to spend that much. Reiki seems to curate itself, though, and so it changes its game over time. So it doesn't cost that much anymore. So here are just some books. This book I really recommend, actually. This is Gendai Reiki Ho by Hiroshi Doi. And Hiroshi Doi is Japanese, lives in Japan, and has been a member of, I don't know if he's currently still a member of, the society that the original founder of Reiki, in theory, started, right? And that still exists. And so what you're getting here is a picture of Reiki that is closer to what is practiced in Japan, added to the things that really work from Western Reiki. So basically, after World War II, Reiki in Japan goes underground thanks to the United States interim government, right? Everyone who was an energy healer had to get massage licensure, which if you see happening in the United States too, right? The medical industry is always trying to control us and take our shit. I'm a person who benefits from the medical industry in the sense of some of my medications, but the older I get, the more I'm realizing the AMA is the godfather, or the doctors are the godfather, or the insurance companies are the godfather, or the what would I say? Insurance, doctors, hospitals, drug companies, and they're all each other's capos. So, pay attention to what's being legislated in terms of Reiki, because it does. If you see in your state, even if you don't practice Reiki and you don't care, it's a bad sign, because they're trying to get energy healing shut down or made to be as expensive to access as things like massage. Anyway, that happens in Japan. So Reiki kind of went underground. People thought it disappeared. It didn't. And this book kind of tells you a little bit of what it looks like today. There's an earlier book that he wrote I liked a little better, but this is a very, very good one with a much nicer cover. This one was fine. So Walter Lubeck is a German Reiki. There's a lot of sort of well-known German Reiki practitioners. This one was just okay. It felt a little dated. It's very 90s. It didn't leave much of an impression on me. It was fine. I don't not recommend it, but I didn't particularly enjoy it. These aren't Reiki books, but they are part of why this works, I think. So if you don't know Masaru Emoto, who wrote The Hidden Messages in Water, and then this follow-up, The True Power of Water, I just have a hard time saying this. It's quite interesting. This is a very, very inspiring, very hopeful, very strange book. Cannot recommend it enough, regardless of what you practice. This is kind of a follow-up. It's okay. This was less good. This to me is essential reading for everybody. This is pretty useful. This is another of Walter Lubeck's books. I had higher hopes for it than I thought I was going to experience. It's Reiki for First Aid. What it is kind of like, here are hand positions and treatments for different ailments. And in that regard, it's really good. It's a nice reference book. It's a little dated. It doesn't look like it would be that dated, but it is. It's from It was originally written in 1990. That's a long time ago. This Empowerment Through Reiki is a very popular and was a very popular book. I unfortunately cannot recommend this. This is very dated. And the reason that it being dated, and right on this space again. So I was saying this one I can't recommend. It's dated. The reason I can't recommend this is because there's just stuff in here that's just not true. So there was a time, and one of the theories is so. Again, it's hard to talk about this stuff without talking about history, right? Haruo Takata was the woman who went to Japan, learned Reiki. She had been very sick, lost her husband. This is all pre-World War II. And doctors were like, we can't help you. She was going to have surgery in Japan where her parents lived. She got a voice saying, don't have the surgery. There's another way. She found Reiki, convinced them to teach her how to do it, and then eventually she brought it to Hawaii, and that's where it came from. One of the theories is that she sort of created a myth about Usui, that he came to the United States and studied Christianity, and in fact was a Christian, to kind of make it safer for Americans to explore Reiki. I don't know if that's true or not. No one really does. But it wasn't true. And so there's just a lot of the mythology in here. Again, this was probably one of the first books on it. 1988, 1999, 1990. Yeah, no, it wasn't. But definitely has stuff we know now is not true. So can't recommend that one. We're really actually blessed that we do know more about the truth of Reiki now. And I do think Haruo Takata was doing what she could to protect it, but it did create barriers, and I think those barriers are now changing. And that's good, right? Because we do need it. I think we need it. This is called Rainbow Reiki. This is another Walter Lubeck book, and I really wanted to love this. And actually, there are some things about this book that I really enjoyed. Where it goes south for me is it's a little overcomplicated. It's kind of ways of using Reiki beyond the traditional things, which I think is quite cool. Like, I think it is no reason why it can't be used for a lot of things, and you can do a lot with Reiki. You can send it distance healing, and you're not really even sending it because we aren't distant from each other. You can go send it to the past. You can send it to the future. You can, send it to an event, send it to a memory. You can do all of these things. And this kind of is a way of exploring that through what he calls Rainbow Reiki. And there's parts of this that are very cool, but I did feel some of the things were just like, that's a great idea, but I think it doesn't need to be quite that complicated. Reiki Best Practices by Walter Lubeck and Frank Arjava Petter. I actually did like this one a lot. This is maybe more what I was sort of hoping for with Rainbow Reiki, except that I read this one first, and I liked this so much that I read Rainbow Reiki next. So this one I thought was actually better. And this is really kind of like just a collection of things you can do with Reiki for yourself, for others. Some things are dependent on what level you have, but I don't know. I really, really do. I liked this one a lot, and I really do recommend this one. It's fun, and it gives you a lot of things you can think about. Reiki Fire. I recommend anything that sort of explores... Oh my god, there are children outside having fun, and it's pissing me off. Like, don't they recognize that there's cranky people living here? Reiki Fire, yeah. It's such an un-Reiki thing to say, right? So this is kind of a look into what Reiki looks like after we sort of start learning, or really I should say they start learning about what really happened. So some things that contributed to this were sort of the location of Usui's grave, which has a very long biography of his life, the discovery or rediscovery of the society that carries on his traditions, some of their written things, some of them things they won't let out. And so we get some newer history books, kind of like the one I shared earlier, the Gendai Reikiho, that actually has real history in it. And this is a good one, and this kind of gives you a sense a little bit more of like what traditional kind of pre-Western Reiki looked like, or looks like. This I recommend too. This is an evidence-based history of Reiki, similar in topic to stuff, and some of what's in here has been published elsewhere. by these authors. This is from the International Center for Reiki Training, who publishes this. So this is William Lee Rand, created the ICRT, Reiki.org, and they have a magazine, and they publish some books, and what they do really are publishing books that are kind of, as you can see, it's sort of anthologies of articles. So this is a collection of articles from the ICRT's magazines about just the history of Reiki based on new information. And there's really interesting things in here, like communication, demonstrating that this did come with a page that wasn't secured, weirdly, so I wound up getting this free. But here's the letter we got saying that Asui was not a Christian and never taught here, etc. So it's really, again, it's sort of, there's a little bit of debunking, there's some Q&As. It's not the most riveting scholarly approach, but it's actually very riveting. It's not the most scholarly approach, but it's as close as we get in this world. This is, I mentioned earlier, did I put that book? Yeah, I did, Gendai Reiki Ho. So Hiroshi Doi, and I talked about the other book with the lovely cover with the wave on it, and I said there was an earlier book by him that I preferred, and it's this one. This one I found a little more interesting. And again, maybe because the second one was similar. This one obviously has a really unfortunate cover. The other one has a much better cover. But I liked this one more. And I really recommend this. If there's one book on this list that you get, I would get this one. Because it's a Japanese man living in Japan who has learned Western Reiki and is incorporating both. And I just think it's wonderful. Western Reiki is simplified. The idea, for Hawaii Takata was, a lot of Japanese culture doesn't make sense to Americans, and that's actually true. Not to say that we can't, but it just doesn't, or we don't. It's a very different. Japan is a not individualistic, very, very communal, very, very rank-centric society, and the United States is very individualistic and hates rank, except when we like it. So there are just cultural things I think maybe we can understand now, but even today I think we misunderstand a lot of spirituality from there because we understand it through an individualistic, capitalistic lens. The Spirit of Reiki, excellent, really recommend it. This is Walter Lubeck, Frank Arjava Petter, and William Lee Rand. This is kind of like the traveling Wilburys of Reiki, or they were for a while. They don't really write together anymore, but they wrote this book together. Each chapter is by a different one of them, and it's really just a bunch of really great Reiki articles, topics, chapters, techniques. I just really think it's wonderful. I really enjoyed it, and it's what made me read all the other books by the other guys. This I would recommend as well. This is the original Reiki Handbook of Dr. Mikao Usui. Mikao Usui was not a doctor. In the United States, he's typically given the title of doctor as like a respect. His students would have called him sensei. It sort of feels weird to me when white Americans use Japanese terms that way. I tend to call him teacher, Usui, or teacher, teacher. But anyway, this kind of is the Reiki as we understand it today that Usui would have taught. And I think it comes from documents and people who knew him, etc., who are still alive. And it just is, it's kind of Reiki before Western Reiki. And, it's also it's a full color book. It's not a long book, it's very thin. But it's really good. So yes, I would absolutely get this for anyone who is interested in Reiki. This is, as close to sort of we can get today what a student would have gotten. Now, one of the other things that Hawaii Takata did, was to say you can't write anything down. So she didn't have a manual and no one could take notes. Which is why this was sort of, I think, one of the first Reiki manuals. And we don't see anything written prior to the 80s in the United States, because it was only after she died that people said, that doesn't work for us anymore. The Reiki source book. This is a really good book with some tonal problems that drive me nuts. I recommend this book. I found it incredibly readable, especially for something that's kind of an encyclopedia. There's just this tone of superiority, and there's an anti-New Age thing that you'll see in a lot of Reiki spaces, not all of them, that drives me nuts. Now, there's a reason why people get pissed off and grossed out by New Agey shit, and I get it, but it also annoys me when there's a fundamentalist view of it too. That said, it's still a very, very good book, and I missed reading it when I was done. Like, I wanted to read it again, despite that tone. So that's saying something. So this is a new edition of an older book that was very, very popular. I recommend it. I just have reservations about the bias of the tone. This was the first Reiki book I read, and it's okay. It's pretty good. I neither recommend it nor not. It was the only one in the bookstore, and it's Reiki, and I think it's pretty good. But it's a UK book, so it's going to talk about the business side of things from a UK point of view. This I really had high hopes for, and I just don't like it. I did learn a few things from here, but to me, this tries to talk out of both sides of its mouth. Reiki can't harm, and there's stuff in here that just... It's like, you can't do Reiki on a cancerous tumor or use the power symbol because it'll increase the... No, that's not what Reiki does. Reiki doesn't heal or make a tumor. Reiki only acts for your highest good. Now, if your highest good is that it's time for you to pass away, I guess it could do that, but that's not how it works. So it just felt just felt like a white person's view of Reiki, honestly. So I really can't recommend this. I apologize to the author, who I'm sure is a lovely person, but it just does not work. This just came in today, actually, and this was hard to find. I don't know why. It's not out of print. It doesn't seem like... This looks like a new copy. It doesn't seem used. Oh, maybe it is used. Yeah, it was only $4. That's not what I paid for it. So there's a big old sticker on this book I paid $15 for, saying it's $4. So how cute is that? Anyway, this was hard to find. It's kind of like a travel guide to Mount Karama, which is where Asui found Reiki. And there's something really lovely about learning about Japan, and learning about where Reiki comes from, and what were the conditions under which it emerged. Especially because it was watered down so much for us, in the United States and in a lot of Europe and much of the world, really, because it's this version of Reiki that people know. You can do level 1, 2, 3 and you're a master, so-called, and boom, you're done. And some people break it up into more classes. Some people, add additional kinds of Reiki, but it's really level 1, 2, and 3. In Japan, when it started, you didn't go to level 2, and it didn't really work the same way. They had different levels, but it wasn't like 1, 2, 3 as we know it today, until your teacher was like, you're ready, which is a very, very Japanese thing, So you could be a level 1 for years and years and years, or months. So we don't do it that way, obviously, and I think people would give up on it in the United States, obviously, because we're very impatient, and I think that's one of the innovations that Takata made to it, or that Reiki and Takata made to it, to make it easy for Americans to get our minds behind. But to sort of go backwards and understand it is quite cool. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's not, it isn't like, this isn't a novel you sit down and read. I think it's really just like, this is a used copy because it's been highlighted. It's a travel guide, but I won't necessarily be going to Japan anytime soon because I'm poor, so... this is my version of that. So anyway, this is a very long video, but I've been wanting to make this for a while anyway. I've just been wanting to talk about it. So I hope that this is interesting, and I hope that you're well. And I, just to sort of say what I started to say in the first video, like, this is all because I'm sharing this because it's helped me get through. We need to heal in order to get through all this, because there's a lot to get through, and we need to be there for each other. So that's where this is. So I hope this was interesting. Take care. Be good. We will talk soon.